Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? It's Geoff, Mosher, and Adam Caplan, and this is going to be a pre-NFL Scouting Combine edition of Inside the Birds. For many of us, for many people, once they've turned the page from the Super Bowl, the NFL Scouting Combine is the premier off-season event. It's fun, so we're going to talk about the athletic testing that everybody gets to see on TV. That's the fun part. But Adam, we know that there's a lot more involved in the combine than just watching the prospects and their athletic testing. There's the discussions, there's the medicals, there's a whole lot of stuff that goes into the combine. So we'll preview it, and so our listeners know you'll be going out there. We've been triple staffing this, but you're going to go out there to Indianapolis. In fact, when people listen to this, you might already be there. I checked the weather, and you're a lucky man.
Yeah.
It's not going to be that cold. That's the first and foremost. You're going to have a nice time in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I'll miss it in Philly. It looks like it'll be tennis weather, low to mid 50s. But no, what we're going to do in this show, we don't just repeat stuff. We actually go inside what actually goes on. I had a great talk with an AFC coach for an hour on Sunday. So he walked me through everything. This guy's been in the league a long time. Not that we didn't know some of the stuff, but he gave me some stuff. I was like, wow, there were a couple things I was not aware of. So we're going to take you inside like no one can with this combine. We're going to go over the value, medicals. We're going to explain to you what they're actually looking for. The interviews, we're going to go through everything that we were told that's important, not important. There's a lot of stuff that's overvalued. We're going to explain that in today's show.
Absolutely. Now, we've already, on Inside the Birds, started to tantalize the crowd, right, with some draft preview, because your mock draft that you've done a nice job of breaking up into 3 parts, right, as part of a podcast. The first time that Adam has done this for Inside the Birds, and it's been a really awesome experience just watching the feedback on it and seeing people listen to it, is you've done your own first-round NFL mock draft. You broke it up into 3 pieces. I believe the third and final segment will run Tuesday. I think we said we're going to have that. So part 1 and part 2 are there. You should not only check it out to hear who Adam thinks at this point will go to the team, certainly. But you had a lot of really good intel just as far as team needs. Like, nobody knows this far out who's going to take who, but just really going through what teams are starting to think of certain prospects as they enter the pre-draft process. So there'll be the combine, there'll be the pro days, there'll be the visits, and we'll get so much information that could or couldn't change. But Adam, we talk about this all the time. Most draft boards it's not that they're set now, but they have a very good order at this point. Some things can move it, but whenever you hear the term like, this guy's just all of a sudden became a first round pick, or this guy's all of a sudden a second or third.
Mostly nonsense.
Not the case. Yeah, it's not hot air.
Yeah. Although now I've said this before at the Senior Bowl, when Matt Jones, the former Arkansas quarterback, ran by me and everybody else and nobody could cover him. That was one of the few times in my career that a guy literally moved up because of something he did over 2 or 3 days. Like, moved way up. That actually happened. But no, you're right. It's all fiction. Not all. Let me rephrase it. It's mostly fiction when a guy this is what happens when teams reach. The Patriots, when Chad Jackson, the Florida receiver, he ran a way better 40 time than people thought. He just ran great. He was a receiver, and he got overdrafted by the Patriots. Mm-hmm. The tape showed he should have been a 4th or 5th round pick, and they overgraded him because of his time. All parts of his workouts were good. Okay, I get that, we're going to explain to you how NFL people see this stuff. The teams that overvalue the combine by position are the teams that just don't know what they're doing. And you got to be careful with that stuff. I get it. Every team has made mistakes over the years. All 32 teams, yes. Every team has made mistakes. But it's the teams that actually understand the value of it and what you need to get out of it, which is the reason why we're doing the show today. Those are the teams that get it. And the teams that don't continue to overvalue. Like, my favorite one is like a 40 time for an offensive lineman or defensive lineman. Yeah. So particularly defensive lineman. So you're telling me if a defensive lineman has to go 40 yards upfield, you tell me that's what you want from your lineman? No, you want short area quickness. We'll explain that.
3-cone drill. Much
3-cone, right. And Joe Banner told us that. In fact, Joe was one of the first people to go on the record explaining me that to you and I some years ago on our show Inside the Birds here. Because Joe said, he would say, listen, everyone's got me pegged for analytics, There's certain data that, yes, we transfers well to the NFL, certainly does not. Some of it's meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the value of the show day. We want to separate fact from fiction.
To your point, the Rams are considered one of the better drafting teams in the NFL, certainly under their current administration with Lester Snead as the GM and Sean McVay as the head coach. I mean, they've hit on so many guys on day 2, day 3. We've talked about them when they played. Puka, Byron Young, Colby, what's his last name? Who's the other lineman that's pretty good? I can't even remember. But they've Steve Avila, the center, is a third-round pick. A lot of their team, they hit, and they don't even go to the combine, correct? Right? They don't send their
I know
there's a few people, but they're not like fully staffed at the combine.
Yeah, I know their coaches some years. In fact, I know there's an NFC East team that is not, most of their staff will not go. Their scouting staff will go, the head coach will go, but I don't believe that most of their coaches are going to go. And then the Rams, I know some years they've not sent the coaches. I don't know about the personnel staff. Leslie's talked about why. Maybe there was a year they didn't go at all, which seems ridiculous because, as you were saying to me off the air here, you need to get the interviews done, right?
Yeah.
But they all share the workout tape. They get access to all the data from the workouts. But I think part of it, as we move along here, and we'll get into this in a minute, but you have to understand what the combine is and isn't, which is what we're going to describe today. It's just a small piece. Tape is 75% of the grade. That's pretty much what you and I gotten in the 8 years. This is year 8 for us out of the show, is that the tape grade, the all 22 grade, is about 75%. Then the rest of it is measurables, athleticism, character. You could go through the list of of issues of like the Bill Polian checklist, which when we worked at ESPN together, Bill had that. I have to find it. I have a screenshot of it. I remember taking it when we were on set together. I thought this was like brilliant. I took it, and I would refer to it after a number of years, but I have to find it. I have to find out what year it was. Mm-hmm. But you just got to take it for what it is. It's like the Senior Bowl. Remember, the Eagles were one of the teams that would overdraft for the Senior Bowl. It's 3 days of practice, 2 of that are really important, right? Comparatively to the third one, which is like a Friday practice for an NFL season. Mm-hmm. You just got to be careful of the value put on it.
I want to ask you this because there's a perception. I think some of it is legit, that when you win the Super Bowl or even go to the Super Bowl, when you play that long, it does put you behind the 8 ball a little bit going into the offseason. Now, not from, I don't think, a scouting standpoint, as people might think, because you still have your guys still have their reports due at a certain time. You still have draft meetings. But like the Eagles go to the combine, this week, and they don't have a quarterbacks coach. And you imagine, like last year, if they had changed a lot of staff, that let's say they had got bounced out in the first round or didn't make the playoffs, obviously it gives you more opportunity to do interviews and find people. But yeah, the more you play and the deeper you play, and when you make the Super Bowl, it is harder then to find some kind of coaching vacancies, fill coaching vacancies. So the Eagles go to the combine without a quarterbacks coach, without an assistant to make on the offensive side to make up for the loss of TJ Pagnetti, who was at the last check. He was the assistant, O-line or running backs coach, right?
O-line. He used to run O-line. In fact, apparently that's what I was told that that Kellen Moore really liked, his work with Stout.
Right.
That's a really good find. I mean, good for TJ, because he had been with the Eagles for like over 10 years. So that's good for him. But yeah, they have to do that. But the other thing is to just understand their free agent board is done. They had that, they tweaked it,
right?
December, January, February. But there's certain hires, as you were alluding to, for coaching staff. That's big, but they'll get that. They'll get that taken care of. Remember they hired Gunter Brewer at the combine many years ago. I think in 2018 or 2019. We saw this because, in fact, Sean Desai was on my flight from I think from Philly. Yeah, he was. It was Philly to the combine when he got his job 2 years ago. It's just funny how things happen. So yeah, a lot goes on here, but more hires are done at the Senior Bowl than here. Most hires obviously are done by now.
Right. So yeah, they'll go into the combine, probably, definitely looking around the landscape, see what they can do there. But from everything else, from a scouting and personnel standpoint, they're in good shape. And this is a big event for them. They will have everybody there, and they have a lot of key free agents that they're going to have to deal with, and have discussions with agents and in back rooms of Indianapolis, watering holes in restaurants and everything like that. So this is a very critical time, a critical offseason for the Eagles, Adam, as they kind of try to, and Howie and Nick will speak. I don't know, at the time of us recording this, I don't think the NFL has released
they haven't
schedule, which is weird. Usually they do that several days before, but you can almost guarantee that they like to get it over with quickly. Howie, Nick, the Eagles organization like to speak on the first day. They don't typically say very much, but every once in a while you'll get some honesty out of them. And so I would think by the next time we do an Inside the Birds podcast, we'll be able to react a little bit to whatever is said in there. And then, of course, you'll be there doing your thing, schmoozing and, getting intel as well. So it'll be a really interesting next few weeks as we head into the off season and get our intel. I mentioned your mock drafts route. Andrew DeCecco has been doing a great job with the DeCecco dailies. We've been doing a lot of planning and strategizing, which is one of the reasons why I won't be at the combine, but I will still be dialed into what I need to be. But we're doing a lot of work for those who have been asking about the off season for both our mainstream platform and our Patreon platform as well. And we do want to welcome our newest member to Patreon, Stephen W. We thank him for hopping aboard and look forward to what the offseason brings, Adam.
Yeah, we have also from Indy. I will be live Thursday night for our Patreon members, patreon.com/InsideTheBirds to become a member. And we were lighting it up last Thursday, man. We gave him a ton of information, kind of explaining. You got to be careful with the rise in the cap. The cap does not mean you spend more cash. It just means you have more space and more flexibility. The league hasn't finalized it yet. They've given the clubs a ballpark idea of what it's going to look like. It's definitely going to be way bigger than they expected. For the second year in a row, the cap is going way up, higher than the cap guys thought. So it's great. It's always good, by the way. It's always a good thing, but be careful. You also, winning free agency does not give you anything. It does not guarantee you anything, except unless you draft Saquon Barkley or, you sign him.
I was going to say, I think the last year might have been one of the few years where the team that won free agency won on the field as well, right?
Well, Howie also won the draft with the two for those Coop and Quignon. Oh God, what a season Howie had.
And Jalen's Hunt too, man. To
yes.
At the end of the year as a third-round pick, who was viewed as a guy who had a long way to go, and he does have a long way to go, but it was not as long as originally you would think because he was able to get on the field and make an impact.
Well, he had to play because remember their plan was not to play him. Their plan was hopefully Nolan Smith would improve. He didn't look good for him early in the season, and then Bryce Huff more or less got benched. He got his snaps reduced. Then he had the wrist surgery. BG unfortunately gets hurt. Nolan stepped up big time around weeks 5 or 6. It was after their bye. He was on fire. He started to really play well. Hunt was the fourth edge, and then they were finding him situationally some roles to play, and he just did a great job. You're right. We'll see. Again, we're not even at free agency yet. I'm fascinated to see because I'll tell you what, free agency will give us some clues, right? It'll give some clues in terms of do they add edge rusher or not. And then if BG retires and somehow they're able to not fleece, but they're going to have to eat some cash. But if they could find some way to move Bryce Huff, Bryce Huff, who I was talking about before, who had the wrist surgery, if they're able to move him, Hunt actually may be starting. I think somewhat of a long shot because, as you said, he's got a long way to go, but he really improved rapidly. I know what you're referring to. Some of his pass rushers were phenomenal. We didn't talk enough about him. Leading up to the Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl was also good. Number 58, by the way, we're in Trent Cole's number. I think he's 58, right?
Yes, Trent Cole is 58.
So he's a guy to watch, and the free agency will give us our first clue in terms of him potentially being a starter.
So what we also didn't know, speaking of edges, is how about Nolan Smith, the fact that he played, I think, the second half of the Super Bowl with a torn tricep that he suffered at some point. You wouldn't have known, man. The dude was out there balling.
Yeah, he's boy, and we've got the back surgery for a procedure for Cam Jurgens. Then Dickerson hinted that he's going to have left knee surgery, and Landon unfortunately has had significant knee issues in the past. In college, so boy, you better have some depth. We'll talk when we do the Eagles team needs, which won't be on the show, but we'll do it closer to free agency. definitely offensive line. Remember, Fred Johnson's contract is up.
Yep.
So they're definitely offensive line is certainly going to be challenging.
100%. It is. It's not rare as an Eagles draft where they don't come away with at least one offensive lineman. So we'll see. Last year was two, but they let the center. What's his name?
Bill McMahon. Yeah, he was too small.
Yeah, he was small, but amazingly, the Rams, who probably run more inside zone and duo than anybody in the league, picked him up and had him on the 53. So that was a really interesting personnel move. But yeah, the Eagles always hit the offensive line there.
Well, it's funny you say that before we move on, because I'm looking as I do, because I'm on the show that we're going to drop Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. is going to be the third part of my mock draft, and I don't do trades in them. So 31 picks will be made before the Eagles pick for this mock, and it's like I know people say, "Oh, you're so boring. Why are you giving them an alignment?" It's for the same people who probably said, "Boy, Lane Johnson was a boring pick." You think? I don't think so.
Right?
Be careful.
Who is the most difficult team and prospect match in your mock that you had? Well, and don't give it away yet because you still haven't done the third leg. In your first two legs, where did you go? This one's just a tough one. But
okay, I think it's Will Campbell, the tackle for Florida State. I mean for LSU, maybe.
LSU,
yeah. I kept Kelvin Banks, another one, because I've heard from some offensive line coaches how talented he is. I'm like, damn, man, I cannot. I just the way it's explained to me with you, always, it's the best player available at position of need for the future. You don't draft for the season and say, we're cutting everybody. No, you're drafting for the future with an eye on this year. So, knowing that I look at contracts, I'm like, okay, well, they've got this guy for this year, but then this is a problem 2 years down the road. So, yeah, it's always helpful when you know contracts to kind of figure out where a team's going to go. So that Banks and Campbell, and I looked at a couple teams that have offensive line problems down the road, but I'm like, man, but this team could use this position. It gets tougher. And then I'm like, oh, my God, I'm going to go with 3 Michigan players in the first 15 picks. Oh, I can't do that. But
I can see it.
Yeah, that's the point, right? With Graham and Grant and the other kid. So
yeah, certainly too.
Will Johnson's a good player. So you just gotta be, and I probably did call Ashton Genty Rashad Genty. I'm sure I did it in the. I know it. People love calling me out when we're human beings, folks. We're gonna mispronounce a name if we don't have it. Like the receiver from Arizona, who might be the first receiver off the board in top 10. Yep. Big kid is 6'5", McMillan. Yeah. I can't pronounce his first name, so I just kept calling him McMillan. But Rashad Genty was a former Bengal and a former Eagle. I do remember him. He was I
remember that name. Yeah,
little rusher outside, strong side linebacker. Yeah.
Yeah, anyway. I've actually made the mistake in my head of calling him Alshon Genty.
Oh, did you really? Well, in our town we call him Alshon Jeffries. We put the
Jeffries. Yeah, I still remember being on radio. I'm going to say this story for my life. Yeah. We had a caller call in. I could tell he was a little bit older. And he called him Alshon Jefferson, and I couldn't stop.
That's a good one.
We need to re-sign Alshon Jefferson, and I just burst out laughing.
That's a good one. That's actually, I love when, it's like with Chase Daniel, and I got called out by Chase when I saw him in the locker room. I think I don't know where I guess I said on Twitter or something. I put the S on it. I mean, come on. At the end of his name, that's not a bad one.
Yeah.
What's that?
That's not like the
I know.
Same thing with Asante Samuel and Asante Samuels,
Right, people with Aslan Samuel. Right. We should have Asante on sometime. I know he's following us on Twitter. We should have him on. But you're going to screw up some names. You do your best. It's hard sometimes. I've told the story about Jaquay Parker. No one could figure it out. We all thought it was Juqua. Right. Juqua, was that it? J-A. I don't remember.
We always, when they first got him, we thought it was Juqua. And then,
and then he changed it.
But then he changed his last name too to Thomas.
Right, to Tom. Right. So I mean, come on, it's tough. So, but to move this along, and then the other one I struggled with because tight end is not a good value in early in the draft. But if a guy is so great, it's Brock Bowers. Who, and I'll admit, I thought it was a ridiculous pick at the time, only because they drafted Michael Mayer. Mm-hmm. I know it was a different. The Raiders keep firing people, so it was by a different general manager. But it was by Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels. Mm-hmm. Was the Mayer pick, but I get it. It doesn't mean you can't play 12 personnel. If the guy's so much better than every other player on the board, make the pick. Don't worry about the fans or the media thinks. It just better be right. And by the way, Brock Bowers, Tom Telesco, who got fired after this past season, it's a good. The guy had a monster year and is a really good football player. So you know what? I learned a lot from that decision. You got to draft the best player, man. And it wasn't a need because they had so many needs and still do. By the way, that's just a great pick.
Now we'll get it. We'll talk a little bit about more of this in a minute about value versus not value. But one of the things the combine does help people do is reevaluate tape from one year to the next. Because you just mentioned the Michigan kid. I think you meant also the tight end Loveland.
Loveland, he
did not have a ball out year the way Tyler Warren did. But also Michigan played 3 different quarterbacks, and not one single one of those 3 is going to play in the NFL. Which is just showed you if Michigan had just somewhat competent quarterback play, they probably could have, been in the playoff because the rest of the team was pretty good, but they were playing all these different quarterbacks. So Loveland probably didn't have the kind of year that Tyler Warren had. I mean, they're different tight ends. I don't think Loveland can carry the ball and throw the ball all the way. I mean, Warren is a weapon, not just a tight end. They used him every which way you can, like a Swiss Army knife. But so this is what forces personnel people to go back to the tape throughout the process. And I'm not going to rip it. I'm not ripping anybody here, but the people who knew that Justin Jefferson was not just a slot receiver, that he was able to play outside like he did as a junior or whatever, redshirt sophomore, junior year, because his final year, he played a lot of slot. And then there were some people who thought he could only play the slot.
Yep.
But if you had seen the tape of the year before and went back to it, you see he played the outside and play it at a really high level. So that's an example of things that will send you back to the tape. The environment around you, how you're used, are all really important factors. And sometimes the combine helps do that too. Like the athletic testing, they want to make sure that matches what they saw on the tape.
Well, we got a great nugget on that in a minute, but I just want to touch on before we get started here on the value part of the show today, which is going to be interesting. I remember back in 2020, right? That's the Rager Jefferson year.
Yeah.
So there were coaches on the Eagles staff and on Doug's last staff that thought Jefferson could really only play inside. Like, not that he couldn't play outside, but he could only be successful playing inside.
Right.
And obviously the Eagles got that one wrong, but they're still great because they've been able to cover that. That was a brutal draft for them other than Hurts.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you learn over the years, and you just alluded to it, you got to go through the process and you got to get a lot of eyes on a player. And you can't just listen to one coach. I don't know what Howie's process was for that draft in terms of what those coaches felt. But I do know this. When you have a player like Justin Jefferson, who's a baller, man, his whole story was great, was really not highly recruited to LSU. You kind of have to go through every single whoever, and because he's a first round pick, I'm sure there were like 8 to 10 grades turned in for that guy. I can't believe how many grades were turned in. They could not have all said slot receiver. There's no way.
Right.
There's no way. And that was a learning experience for Howie and their personnel staff and the coaches and those coaches who've left.
Right.
You gotta. We know it's impossible to get everything right. It is. It's literally impossible. But our friend Rick Spielman, came on our show, explained what he saw.
Mm-hmm.
And how he was convinced. He didn't want to talk about Rager because I know Howie's a friend of his, but
he
explained why he had Jefferson as high as he did. And the thing is, and this is another part of what today's show is about, is why we're doing this, the value of time speed versus football speed. There's a major difference.
Right. Great point. Because I think regardless, Jefferson still went into the 20s, and there were other receivers that went ahead of him. I think Ruggs was the first one taken.
Yep.
All right. I think the second one taken was it Lamb? Did it go Ruggs, Lamb, Rager, Jefferson? I feel like there was one other guy.
It seems right because I know the Eagles.
And Lamb didn't go until 17, I think. So for whatever reason, that class of receiver did not get judged properly. And and then Ayuk went even later than that. And if you were to redraft, you got Jefferson and Ayuk. That would be an interesting one. Ayuk and CeeDee Lamb, because they're both very, very good. Lamb's had the better career. Ayuk, maybe a little more explosive. on the outside.
Yep.
But either way, I mean, it's three really, really good receivers. But there were non-wide receiver players who aren't as good as those guys who went even earlier than them. It was just
what's crazy? You know what's crazy about that?
Yeah.
What's that?
It was just a weird evaluation on receiver that year.
It was. In fact, the guy went number 15 who wound up getting traded, Jerry Jeudy, was a guy like people could not figure out what he was as a receiver. Like, Henry Ruggs, and unfortunately his career ended due to the car accident and someone's death, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But Jerry Jeudy is a guy that is he an inside receiver, is an outside receiver? I think he played more inside, I believe, or a lot inside with Cleveland after the trade. But if you look at that draft, I mean, there were a number of that was a sort of a mixed bag draft. Mm-hmm. Successes all over the place, some busts already, unfortunately. Guys who are like Kenneth Murray, because I know Jim Schwartz wanted him. At least that was the word in 2020. A lot of people around the league love Kenneth Murray for the physicality, but he never became the player that a lot of people thought he would be. It's an exact science. You're making bets, so to speak, on young people at 20, 21, 22. I'm glad no one made a bet on me when I was 20. I mean, geez, Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's so hard. It's so hard. You just don't know. You just don't know.
100%. All right, we'll get into things that should be valued, things that are overvalued. But first, you got to hear a word from our great friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schulter, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
All right, do yourself a favor. Go get the best car shopping experience in the business by going to Sky Motor Cars. They're out there in Westchester, PA. If not, you can visit their website, SkyMotorCars.com. Go take advantage of their amazing inventory, their unbelievable customer service. You just can't find this kind of car shopping experience anywhere else other than Sky Motor Cars. That's why they have great deals with Eagles, because they are that well recognized in the industry. So Sky Motor Cars, SkyMotorCars.com. Tell them Adam and Geoff sent you. You will get an even better deal than even you think you can get. All right, so let's talk about things that are valued. I know you said you added some discussions with some people to really, this. So what are like the top two things that really come out of why this is an important event?
So, all right, let me explain. I'm going to go to, if you look at my notes here, we're going to go to letter C here. The official height and weight. Yeah, that's very important because you know this as well as I do. Schools over height receivers and tight ends and linemen. And quarterbacks. It's so funny. There have been a number of quarterbacks at school listed 6'3". The guy wants it being 6'1" or 6'1 plus. That matters, by the way, for quarterbacks. That will hurt a quarterback a little bit. It just depends who it is and what the issues are. But you want to get the weight. Like Kelsey weighed in. Kelsey, you go back to the 11 draft, Jason Kelsey, because he had the appendix issue, so he lost a bunch of weight around the combine, which is part of the reason why he dropped to the 6th round. But so this coach told me, this is interesting on the timing. He said, we were talking about football speed and time speed. He said, listen, you probably don't know this, but there are a number of big-time college programs that have the GPS. The players have it in their shoulder pads.
Tons.
So, because that's, by the way, that's from football games, whereas, you go to I mentioned the Chad Jackson situation with the Patriots some years ago. So if a receiver you think is let's say with pads on, he's playing in a game, he runs a 4.51, right? That's the way he plays. That's his time. That's his football speed. All of a sudden, on a straight line on a 40-yard dash in a t-shirt and shorts on a fast track, he runs a 4.39. You don't all of a sudden, because he ran that time, put him a round higher. The coach said, no, his football speed is a 4.51. Mm-hmm. It's nice that without playing in shorts, when you're not playing football, that you could run fast. Because if you could get his true football speed, you go with that. He said there's no way this coach has been in the league a long time, a couple of decades. He goes, He goes, I'm not a GM. He goes, it's not my job, but I would not. He goes, for someone who I have to turn the grades in, I'm not moving the guy a bit at all. If we get his time speed with pads on, this is what I'm going with. So
Right.
that I thought that was interesting. I had not heard that before.
Well, it sort of makes sense when you think about it, right? I mean, you play the game in pads and not in just
exactly that makes, of course,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. I just
Absolutely.
don't.
Brian Dawkins used to say that all the time about the first 3 days of rookie camp and even the first few days of training camp when you would just practice lightly. When like rookies or free agents who are young would come in, and Brian would say, "Yeah, everybody looks fast. They're flying around the field. Let's see what they look like when they put the pads on and they get hit." And when Brian says it, it's like, let's, in that intense B-Doc Weapon X kind of way.
Yeah.
Like he was aching to hit some of those young hot shots.
Oh, the first day there was nothing like an Andy Reid camp when you were really allowed to hit.
Bloodbath.
Like we would get the schedule from the media staff and go, okay, whatever. I forget what language they use. It'd say pads or no, whatever that you could. As soon as it was the first day, I'm like, I know what's coming. Andy always hit the first day, whatever the day they were allowed to hit, they hit. And although it would only be like 5-7 minutes, it just, there's something about it, the popping of the pads. You go, this is football, man. This is why I love going to practice when Andy would let us go before they shut us down, when you get to see all the practice. I'm talking about the regular season now as I move along here, but doesn't do it anymore. I don't think any teams let you do it, but getting back to the combine. So yeah, I just want to go down to see, because I think it's fascinating, because some of these workouts, as Joe Banner was telling us, you have to be very careful of understanding what they actually are and the value of them.
Right. By the way, when you talk about size, it's not just your height, right? I mean, there are certain positions where certain lengths of body parts are really important. Quarterback, hand size, offensive lineman, arm length, right? Well, you can go back to Chip Kelly measuring people's knees to see what kind of capacity for
wrist
growth
size.
they have. Wrist size, yeah. So certain positions, there's a criteria or a standard where you would like to be able to have a certain either size of hand or length of arm. Because we talked about this with Milton Williams, short arms. That's probably why he was a 3rd round pick, not maybe a 2nd round pick. I think going to Louisiana Tech would have been hard for him to be a 1st rounder, but with his production, he could have maybe been a 2nd rounder if he had longer arms. But that's also, we'll talk about the value versus overvalue. Sometimes people put too much into hand size and arm length.
Well, I mean, Kenny Pickett wears gloves. I mean, that helps him out to get traction. But it's funny when you mentioned the wrist size, right?
Yeah.
So this is a Senior Bowl, and Chip was the head coach, and there's a certain criteria he wanted. So at the Senior Bowl, they look like lobster arms or hands. It was like if you're watching us on YouTube here, it was like a circle and measure the wrist size. So what are they doing? I didn't know anything about it. And I asked the scout, I said, do you know what this is about? He goes, oh yeah, we're measuring wrist size. I'm like, who the hell cares about wrist size? Maybe back then there's a history maybe the wider they are, I don't know what the hell. I don't even know per position why it mattered. Hey, but you know what? Chip was right with sleep. There's no question about that. Sports science. Stout, despite Chip's failure in the end, he brought a lot of good things to Philly, more than you think.
Yeah, and the sports science, Jeffrey Lurie kept a lot of that that Chip brought, even the smoothies. So your 1A on the notes was really important, and it just sort of jogs my memory, because I remember being a young reporter, going to the combine the first time, talking to different coaches, trying to meet people around the league, and I would ask them, what really is the benefit of all this? Because for the longest time, I mean, every year people have the argument, how much is this value? How much is it worth? Does it have to be in Indianapolis? All this stuff. And I would say 9 out of every 10 people you ask, clearly, no. Immediately, they shoot back the answer immediately. It's always the biggest value of the combine is you're expecting to hear like athletic testing, interviews, push-ups. No, it's medicals. It's always the first thing I always heard back, medicals. And yet it's probably the thing I didn't have on my mind the most as a young reporter, but now you do.
Yeah. So what happens is, first of all, I don't know if they're that early. They used to be like 5 a.m. They used to get the players up early, and they'd be in there for a number of hours going through everything, every kind of medical test evaluation. So now this is unfortunate. Some careers have been ended not a lot of them, but they found something, could be a kidney issue where they couldn't get the player cleared. Might get a second opinion, but there are some players who just would not be cleared to play. And it's and the big thing though is they get a further update on anyone who's had surgery. Then they have what's called a combine medical recheck. They'll have it, I think, late March or early April.
Yep.
Where they bring the player back and the clubs get an update on where another opinion on where he's at for the draft, and every team gets the same medical information. Now, what you can do as part of your pre-draft visits is you could still bring the player in. He can also get medical evaluation right before the draft if you need him to. Can't work him out there, but you can get a medical evaluation because it's very important. Obviously, you want to know what you're dealing with. But yeah, getting this medical evaluation is extremely important, and figuring out after surgery kind of where the player's at. That's paramount. To me, it's the medicals are number one of everything. No doubt.
100%. Who was the quarterback? I remember there was a quarterback that people thought was going to get drafted a couple of years ago. The Eagles signed him as an undrafted free agent.
Oh, I know.
Right?
The kid from Nevada. The kid from Nevada.
Carson Strong? Was that his name?
That's it. You got it. Good job.
Yeah. And there was some medical concerns with him.
Yep.
Right? I mean, I'm sure that kid probably thought he was at least going to be a day 3 pick, but sometimes the medicals, and whether it's your arm, your shoulder, your knee, whatever it is, people see something and they get concerned. And you're right. There have been people who have learned about things they have that they didn't even know about.
That's it. That's the big thing. That now some were just okay. He's got to deal with this, and the agent, the player, the family finds out about it, and all the clubs find out about it. And you'll see the report eventually gets out, almost all of it. Latu, the edge rusher from UCLA, I think, who the Colts drafted in the first round, there was a neck issue. That was a real concern.
Great point.
Talking to teams for the draft, I know you and I had similar information. That was a real concern. But he passed. He was, and he's fine. Good for him. I hope he has a long career. But it starts here with the medicals, because you don't get the medical evaluation that you at Senior Bowl, that you're not getting that. You get it here. That's why it's so important.
100%. And then obviously moving on from medicals, then the interviews become cardinal. I mean, the interviews are crucial. This is again, it's stuff that nobody gets to see. You get to see it later because sometimes teams release videos of their combine interviews, but that's where you really get into the head of a prospect and find out what he's all about, both on the field and off the field. Now, it's still the same, right? You get 30, each team gets to do 30 interviews. Is that correct?
At the combine, I don't know the exact number, but you get a formal and informal, each are 15 minutes. This coach told me on Sunday that the formal one is when the GMs get heavily involved, because they're going after the player for anything in his background that they find out. By the way, you could see the Carson Wentz one with the Eagles from 16. DeFilippo, Reich, they quiz him. They're bringing him to the board. It's actually really cool. The Eagles released it. I think the Eagles released it. It's up. I've seen it. It's really good. You can see what the interview is when they're in the room. They're now done, by the way, at the stadium. What's it called? Is it Lucas Oil?
Lucas Oil Field, yeah.
Yeah, they moved them. Now everything is at Lucas Oil. So, these are important in that you get this coach told me you're getting in front of the player. Yes, they're coached up by the agent, no doubt about it, but you still get in front of them. Then you have other ways to do it. You could get in front of them before the pro day, after the pro day, private workouts. Your top, they call them top 30 visits. You get 30 pre-draft visits leading up to the draft in late April. So you're going to get in front of these guys, but this is the first time you could do it. And the cool thing is there's no time limit when you get them to they got to be out by the end of the day. Mm-hmm. But if you bring them in when you're at home, if they get there at 8 a.m., they could leave it, 10 o'clock at night. You get them all at your building and you really get to know them.
No, you're not supposed to call them top 30 visits because they're not technically the top 30 players on your board.
I know, right. But they're technically
you get sensitive to that.
I know they're technically called top 30. Why do they call them that?
I don't think that they are. I think that the media came up with that. I think they're just called 30 visits. Like
I call them 30, and the agents are always, my client's got a top 30 I'm like, okay.
Yeah, well, that's because the agents want to hype up their client.
I guess I don't know. I'll have to ask if that's but they're 30 anyway. So medical evals we just gave you. Interviews are important.
By the way, it's 60 interviews at the combine is what it is.
Okay, 60. Okay, cool. Total. All right, per team.
Yep.
Okay. So getting the real height, the real weight, you work the time getting you have to, like, if you remember, Keenan Allen did not. He was coming back from something from I think he was in the 13 draft without looking. I think that might have been his year. Anyway, Keenan Allen didn't have. It took him a while to get official time. That kind of hurt him a little bit. He wound up being a great player, but that was a concern. So you want to get it as early as possible. Yeah, you could wait to the pro day, but you like to get it done now. The value of the workout is by position. For the lineman, you want to get the 10. You know, like the first 10 yards is the 10-yard. What is it? The 20-yard, the 10-yard split.
Yes.
Yeah, 10-yard splits, very important. Short area quickness is what that's all about. You know, broad jump for certain positions is important. We're in late February here. We'll explain more to you once we get all the numbers back. We'll go over some of the top ones. But you know, if you're like a receiver and you have a broad jump that's like less than 8, that's really bad. Like, that's a concern. Like, that's not good. Like, that's real. If you don't have you should want to have a broad jump 9.5 to 10, if not bigger, longer than that. We'll try to get a former GM on relatively soon to talk about this. But
I think if you're an offensive lineman and you can't get like at least 15 to 20 in the bench press, then that's not good either. Yeah.
At 225, right? You definitely want it. Funny, I was talking to Kerry Rhodes on Sunday on Fox Sports Radio. He actually did 225. That's pretty good for a DB, I would think.
For a defensive back, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I thought, if I'm not mistaken, we'll have to go back and look. Quinyon Mitchell did a pretty decent amount. I thought he almost got into the upper teens of.
I have that. I'll look that up. Oh, who was the guy who went off? Was it Scott Young, the former BYU Andy Reid guy? Was it either one?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Quinyon Mitchell, Q.
I mean, he's a strong corner anyway, so you would expect him to do more than like the 7 or 8 that sometimes you see a wide receiver or corner do. But I thought his number was pretty good last year, if I was not mistaken. For some reason, the number 18 jumps out at me, but I don't know if that's the case or not.
I will find it. I should have that here. Quinyon Mitchell
So
did.
while you look for that, he's a good.
Oh, wow. Yeah, wow. He did 20. Holy
20.
smokes.
Yeah, I had a feeling it was pretty big. Yeah,
That's really good for a corner. Jeez.
Yeah, very, very good for a corner. But Quinyon's a good person to bring up, Adam, because another value is the small school guys get the exposure that the big school guys already have. So it's really important for them to really, not sell themselves, but just really showcase what they've got. They have to do well in the meetings. You know, this is really for some NFL personnel people, the first time that they're really talking to these guys, because not all of them go to the Senior Bowl or the East West.
So an offensive line coach told me, remember Teron Armstead? I forget. He went to a small school. He went to I'll look it up because I remember seeing him at the East West Shrine. But he said getting him, I think it was here. I think it was at the Combine because he said he got in front of him. I thought he meant the Combine. Wow, Arkansas Pine Bluff. Holy smokes. Yeah.
Arkansas Pine Bluff. Wow.
Yeah. 2013 draft. I just remember it was that player who said getting in front of him, getting to know him, getting to see him work out. Because he was a small school player at the East West Shrine. That's where I saw him. But I remember this longtime NFL offensive line coach telling me that getting a guy like Armstead in front of him in a setting like this was the big reason. It was just something that he never forgot. He thought it was, in fact, wow, his 40-yard, wow, this is insane. He ran a 4.71.
Overvalue.
I know, I totally. But I mean, you realize that's like a tight end time, like that's.
Yeah.
But
well, the Jordan Davis thing, right? Like because
I know you got to be careful with that. But I would say with Armstead, who's been hurt a lot, but has had a good career.
Yeah.
It was the East West Shrine pairing it up with the Combine, and this coach saying getting in front of him. You just mentioned it. Anytime you could get to know a small school player, he's apparently a really high character dude, and that's important, man. Yeah. So like Milton Williams. Milton Williams is another guy. I'm sure like I have to look at his Combine workout, but I'm sure getting in front of him wasn't a bad thing because he's a really good dude too.
Yeah.
Like he's
good dude, smart dude, has a plan. Absolutely. All right, so the small, and then obviously the last, this goes without saying, we've already alluded to it, but all of the post afternoon events, the things that happen in the evening, the NFL GMs making the rounds, talking with other NFL GMs, sometimes trades or the ideas of trades, the seeds of them are sowed at the combine. Plenty of times, actually. Obviously, free agency, discussions of things like that. So that's what this week is for. Every team wants to come home. Now, it's changed a little bit, obviously, since the advent of the legal tampering period where you are free to discuss numbers there. So not all the time do teams come home with exact number figures in their mind, but they have a pretty good idea of what the market might look like and how much demand a certain free agent might be in because of the conversations that they have out in the combine.
Yeah, but Milton Williams, his year, there was no combine because of COVID. He was invited, though.
That's right.
So I don't know what, obviously they got in front of him at some point, probably the pre-draft visit or something. But yeah, the value is interesting of these discussions. So I think when the Eagles made the DeMarco Murray trade with the Titans, if I remember correctly, this is going back a number of years, I believe John Robinson and Howie Roseman talked about it at the combine, and then they solidified. And John is actually, he's no longer GM, but I know he's gotten some deals done there. Howie's done it. You can really move things, and now sometimes they generally will talk like not around people, obviously, but after hours. The thing that I was telling you this story, I saw agents could do whatever they want. They can't get in trouble. Clubs can, but I was not that anyone's going to know what happens at the combine. It's not like someone's taking film. So anyway, I remember one year at Steak and Shake, it was like 1 a.m. and a GM and his head coach were meeting with an agent. And I just talked to the agent an hour before he told me he was meeting with the club about his free agent. And they were in there because it was an offensive lineman, and they didn't wind up signing the guy, but this is what the meeting was about. It wasn't their own player. It was obviously another team's. And I was, if you see me on YouTube, I was like, you're not supposed to do that. He loved it. He's like, dude, you're hilarious. You're killing me. It's just funny because you see it in broad daylight, and a lot of it, I don't know if it doesn't shake and steak as much anymore. It used to be Shula's Steakhouse. You'd see people.
Shula's, there's a couple of back rooms I discovered at St. Elmo, the famous St. Elmo. Harry and Izzy's has a few. But there's a lot of different places you can go and run into people, Now, I've yet to see it to the point where somebody's writing something on a napkin and sliding it.
I actually have. It was I won't say the team.
Okay.
Now, see, here's the thing. I don't know if it was their player or not.
Right.
So the agent did tell me, he goes, he told me to put down what I wanted. And he would take it to his boss.
Right.
And that's the only time I've ever seen this. It's a number of years. It was at the Starbucks. It wasn't the Hyatt. It was there was a Starbucks at another hotel.
Okay.
It might have been at the Marriott. Anyway, I was just like, it's just going to your point to move along here. It's just funny how this stuff's done out in the open. Because look, meeting time is great when you know this in business. Folks are watching us here, or even listening to us. It's great. It's really great when you get in front of people you want to do business with.
Yep.
It's harder over the phone. It's just, you can do Zoom, but it's harder over the phone because they can't really see you. They can't really tell how serious you are sometimes. But doing it in front of them it means a lot. The body language to me is very important when you negotiate.
Absolutely. All right. Before we move on, there are going to be a bunch of Penn State kids here at the combine. You know how much I love my alma mater and the football team. Just want to give a shout out to our friends at the Blue White Illustrated. They are unbelievable with their podcast and their YouTube channel. They're a lot like us, Adam. I mean, they have insider content on recruiting. Sean Fitz does a great job. Nate Bauer, Greg Pickle, and then Thomas Frank Carr is their lead host. Does a lot of tape breakdown, just like Greg Cosell does. So if you love Inside the Birds content and you're also a Penn State fan, definitely check out the Blue White Illustrated. It's just Blue White Illustrated. They have a YouTube channel. They have a podcast. They're part of the On3 network. They do an amazing job, and they're friends of Inside the Birds. So we really appreciate their work, and they like our work too. So a little bit about overvalued things at the combine. We talked a little bit about the athletic testing. It can definitely be like, I think Xavier Worthy had a nice year, and he's going to be a good player, and he should have been a first-round pick. But as soon as he ran that 40 and the Chiefs took him, I think everybody thought he was going to be like a 1,500-yard receiver year one because he had blistering speed and because he was a Chiefs wide receiver with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. He's
Yeah,
not an example of a bust, by the way. I'm just saying sort of how athletic testing really perks people up.
Yeah, and you have to understand what the guy was. He was seen as raw. Oh, the boy, he's Super Bowl. I know the Eagles were killing them, but at least you saw the explosion because, quite frankly, he had a nice rookie season, but the explosive plays were not there like we all thought. Anyone who followed his career,
right?
We were expecting. I know he's a rookie, but at least when he caught the ball, we were expecting to be downfield. But that was not what the Chiefs' offense this season.
Right.
We know that the league has changed in the last 2 or 3 years. So much too deep coverage. You're not throwing over a head and all that kind of stuff. But it's interesting when you look at, for instance, okay, does a vertical jump really mean a lot for linemen? Not really, but it does. It is very lower body explosion for a corner, a safety to a degree, but a corner, a skill position player like a running back, particularly a receiver, lower body explosion. A vertical is very important. You got to be able to explode. We talked about the broad jump. Very, very important. Like again, now every team will have their own way of measuring and what's important. But the 20-yard shuttle, 20-yard shuttle for linebackers is very important. You got to be able to go up and back and around. The 3-cone drill. Now, a lot of players do not do the. I'm looking at last year's combine. So few players did the 3-cone.
Really?
Yeah, more did the 20-yard dash. Most, it seems like. Like 80% of them did not do the 3-cone.
Of all players or linemen?
Oh, I'm going through every. I mean, I'm looking through a couple hundred players.
Wow.
I don't know about 80%, but it's well less than 50%. The 20-yard shuttle is very important. There's no doubt.
Yep.
There's value in that for linebackers. Change of COD, which is a technical term for change of direction. Broad jump. For guys who have to explode, there's no question. It's got to be good. Vert, another one, which is important. Now, but also, you're still not in a uniform. You're not running with pads on. We have to understand tape is the majority of the grade. And you mentioned this earlier. Any team that would ever move a guy up around, which virtually doesn't happen anymore. I think it did years ago, decades ago, when I first started covering the league in the early 2000s with guys who just didn't get it. But now it's tape. These things can move you up a little bit or drop you a little bit if it's a terrible workout, or by the way, if you had a bad interview, if a guy seems disinterested. Now, this coach was telling me on Sunday that the thing about the interviews is, and he goes, he doesn't like to hold, like if a guy comes in, right, he's exhausted. He had the medicals in the morning. He might have had the workouts, whatever the case, whatever. I don't think they're the same day, but let's just say he had a lot of interviews earlier that day, a lot of work that day, had media work, whatever the case may be. And then you're going to interview the guy at 8 at night. The guy's exhausted sometimes.
Yeah.
So be careful of that. Goes on my overvalued list. It's what I said earlier. If you're going to do these interviews, you've got plenty of time to do it. You got it before the combine. During the combine, you had the Senior Bowl, by the way. If they were there, you had the All-Star games. If they were at some of them, these guys, almost all these guys go to All-Star games. Not all of them, but a lot of them do, one way or the other. And then you've got the pro day, before the pro day, after the pro day, at the pre-draft visit if you bring them in, combine workout. I mean, at a private workout. One way or the other, you're going to get in front of the player. It's always good to have as many times as you can, but you got to be careful with these short interviews for 15 minutes. I mean, how much can you really get into? And they're coached up very well.
Yeah. Do you remember when Pete Carroll took his shirt off when DK?
Yes, with the Seahawks, and you see their personnel staff like what they were clapping because of the DK Metcalf, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then he takes his shirt off and flexes. I don't think they like John Schneider. Did you see when they won a Super Bowl? He put after the game, and maybe he had a beer or two. I don't know. I'm not saying he did. I don't know, but it seemed like he may have. And he had the WWE belt on.
Oh yes, I remember that.
Schneids might have had it, but I love that. You know what? Be yourself. That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would have slapped him fine. Like, there you go, Pete. He's probably he's 70s, he's probably late mid-60s then. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, it was fun. It's fun. These interviews can be fun. I think that was Pete's way of making it fun. It can be. These guys are human beings, and you can be a prospect and think, man, I didn't really ace that interview. They asked me a couple questions I was not familiar with. True. And now I'm like, and now I got to go do an interview 5 minutes later, and I'm a little down on myself. So that's why they're not the be all to end all, but they are They're important, but that's why you have those 30 visits. You have another
Yes.
chance to spend more time and be a little bit more prepared.
And by the way, the guys who are not working out Indy, this goes on your point about not you'll get a second chance. Like they have to get they call it a verified 40 time. They have to have it. It's like the end of the world if they don't have it. Oh, we can't draft him. You mean his tape? You're going to throw out his tape because he didn't have a 40. We're not drafting him. I mean,
right.
Come on. It's ridiculous. Some of the stuff you and I have covered this business a long time, and we have total respect for personnel people.
Mm-hmm.
So if the tape is like the best you've ever seen, but you don't have a 40 time, you're not going to draft him.
Right. Didn't Devontae Smith not run the 40 at the
Combine? I don't know.
I think he didn't. Now he might have been injury related or something, but it's like, can you imagine if the Eagles were like,
they traded up, didn't they? Trade up with?
Yeah. Oh no, he did run it. He ran a 4.54, which you want your receivers now to run 4.2, 4.3. But imagine if the Eagles were 4.5. That's the point.
Did he really run a 4.54? Really?
Yeah, he ran a 4.54.
Okay. Well, we know he plays faster than that. To your point, he plays fit. What did the tape show you?
Exactly.
Oh, and there are companies, this coach told me, that take coaching tape from college and they get a ballpark idea of what he runs.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how they obviously have some system. It might be AI. I don't know what the hell it is, but they get it. And look, teams will spend what they have to do to get verified information. So just wanted to take everyone through that. We wanted to because that's our job. That's what we do. Is what we've done this now for 8 years. We want to bring you inside how things go, and we'll do our best to get someone before the draft who's actually done this before. We've had Rick Spielman on, Joe Banner, and several other GMs over the years. But we will get somebody on.
Awesome, good stuff. All right. So again, Tuesday, part 3, the third and final leg of Adam's mock draft podcast, mock podcast, I call it, or mockcast.
Mockcast.
Andrew DeCecco will probably get his version of his Eagles 7-round mock draft coming up soon. He might do that and also a podcast series, and we will continue to turn the page toward the NFL offseason. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the bird. Be sure to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation.